All right, Coconino Trail. That's a wrap for me. 48 miles from the finish, but had a bad crash and it's just not the right thing to continue on. My ribs are definitely bruised, maybe broken. I hit my head really hard. So we are gonna pack up the vehicle and go to Sedona and get a nice warm place to sleep. But this route is amazing. It was a great way to spend Veterans Day riding, and I do I do have to say, with my bike crash, the spot on my helmet where I landed was right on my dad's crash coordinates there. So I felt like he was actually looking after me, making sure I was okay, which I am. Thanks, Dad.
It's been 2 years and 10 months since Rebecca's accident. As you've heard, her journey to healing has been long and winding. And though today she feels actual gratitude for her injury because it's given her so much knowledge of self and put her on a new and exciting path in many ways, she still wouldn't wish the suffering on anyone. I'm Celine Yeager, podcaster, health journalist, and longtime friend and past teammate of Rebecca's. Through this four-part Concussion podcast series, we've been taking you through Rebecca's journey, including the treatments that she's sought and conversations with leading-edge experts about how they're treating concussion today. In this episode, we cover the basics on how to prevent concussion, as well as what to do if you do hit your head, based on what we've learned throughout the series. We also take a deeper dive into who might be more susceptible to concussion and post-concussion symptoms, including if females have special risk factors, with special guest Dr. Julie Rios, who practices at UPMC Center for Fertility and Reproductive Endocrinology, and who is leading a groundbreaking women's health concussion study that aims to understand the broader effects of concussion on women's health. We obviously cannot cover every single aspect of concussion in a limited edition podcast series, and none of this is obviously a substitute for medical advice, but we really do hope that you've learned as much as we have about what this hidden injury looks like in real life, and how experts have very much changed their approach to actively treating these head injuries and their aftermath, which can plague people for years and sometimes life. In fact, the day we made this final episode, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services officially recognized brain injury as a chronic condition. So if you've been suffering and feel alone and like something is wrong with you, that you're not better by now, you are not alone. And we hope that you've heard there is also always hope. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy our final episode and this series. Okay, it's our final episode, Rebecca.
I can't believe it. This has actually been quite a journey to relive the journey.
It has been. It's been more of a journey of discovery than I actually thought it would be, because we've been talking about this so long and there's a million different Google Docs on it and we've scripted it and re-scripted it, and it still went places that I didn't think it would. So it's been pretty cool.
Well, and same for me. I've lived this journey, but I'm learning more now, which is exciting through talking about it. It's actually helping my healing to process and go through it, but also learning some of the new things from the professionals that we've been talking to and the experts we've been talking to. So it's a fun ride so far. We still have one more episode. So
Yeah, and it's a big one. So we should probably get right into it. I mean, I wanted it occurred to me that we should do a little bit. I don't want to spend a ton of time here because there's actually not a ton to say here. But obviously, you'd really like to avoid hitting your head, right? We've talked a lot about what to do if you do and what the recovery process looks like or doesn't look like. Um, but it's important for people to know, especially if you have had a previous concussion, you are 3 to 5 times more likely to have another concussion. It predisposes you. And as everybody knows with anything, the best you just want to avoid it. Like the best treatment is not getting it to begin with. So, I'd like to talk a bit about that element, and especially let's talk helmets, because I think there's still some misconceptions out there that helmets absolutely can prevent concussion. And if you go flying 10 feet into a ditch like you did, they won't necessarily. So let's talk a bit about how we can protect our head.
Yeah, I mean, prevention is the best medicine for any sort of injury. And we definitely don't want people to avoid riding their bikes or go enjoying their lives or go doing the things that are
Go
mentally and physically
skiing or yeah, all
super
those things.
healthy and fun. Yeah. But bottom line, if you're doing an action sport, you're doing an outdoor sport, helmets are really a must. I remember when it was not cool to ski in a helmet, and now
Totally, I never did.
right. And now you were like, wait, you're not wearing your helmet? And bikes are the same way now. There also was a time when people weren't even racers weren't wearing helmets a long time ago,
Yeah,
but cycling. And you still see though, you'll see a kid and parents riding bikes, and the kid has a helmet on and the parent doesn't. So first and foremost, you've got to wear a helmet. You've got to get a good helmet. There's some amazing technology right now that one, it's not going to protect you. It's not going to prevent a concussion. I will say that, but it might save your life. It might minimize the impacts. I know if I didn't have a helmet on, I landed straight on a pinpoint rock that made a really, really big dent in my helmet. And if that had been my skull, the results might I might not be here today talking about it. And so helmets do save lives. And the technology in them, especially some of the rotational technology and some of the things that have come in the last 5 to 10 years, are really, really pretty amazing. Also, that old styrofoam helmet sitting in your garage from your grandpa, throw it out.
you can
I
put
think
beer in that styrofoam bucket,
you
but
can
that's
hold it in
about it.
beer. If you do fall on your helmet and there's damage to it, retire that helmet. If it's been a few years old, even though you haven't fallen on it, retire that helmet because it's a piece of equipment that you really want to have work. I know MIPS is a really cool technology, and that stands for multi-directional impact protection. Almost every really good helmet on the market right now has MIPS, and you'll see a little yellow circle, and you can see those technologies on almost any helmet. So go for the best protection. Like, why not? Our brain is a really important part of our body. And so get a cute, sassy, awesome helmet that also has great technology. So that really is the best prevention, is to get a good helmet and wear it religiously. Even if you're riding to the grocery store, it doesn't have to be, I've had friends who've been killed or
Yeah.
injured riding to the grocery store on their townie, and you don't plan for an accident. And so
Yep.
putting a helmet on your head, even if you're just riding around the block or something like that, is the best thing that you can do. And get a super cute one. They're great helmets. But that's really the number one thing, is to wear a helmet and then retire it when it's time.
Yep. No, great advice. And the MIPS, or the multi-directional impact protection, a lot of the helmets will have them. You can read up on it if you're curious if if it doesn't have a circle, if they have some other technology in it. But I was doing a little research before this, and though nothing is 100% concussion proof, there is a percentage of decrease of head injury that can happen with a helmet because it just absorbs the impact, and the better it can absorb the
Absorb
impact. Yeah.
Yeah, it absorbs impact, and then it actually, the MIPS is a rotational
Yeah.
thing. And so when we've talked to some of our experts, they talk about how even if you don't have brain trauma in a physiological, impact, the brain sloshes and moves around and twists in there, and that's what disrupts a lot of those neural connections and those neural pathways. That's a lot of the disruption that we've learned about in this series.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. The other point that I think is often overlooked is just strength training. Neck strength comes up a lot in the literature, and the first thing you think about, of course, is like football players with like the big straps on their heads and chains and doing, the getting the giant necks. And I don't like necessarily think we need to, promote that particular strategy, but having some stability and strength in your upper body, and a lot of women are proportionally weaker there, and they think that might contribute to some of the things that we see in the sex differences, just like the stuff that you would normally do, whether it be barbell rows or dumbbell rows or deadlifts. Like, just get some strength in your upper body because it can just help, so you don't ragdoll when you fall.
Yeah, I mean, for anything, your musculature is your armor. Absolutely. Like the stronger, more flexible, especially also more flexible that you are, just kind of the better general all-around health and strength. That's your armor. So when you do hit the deck or you fall down or something happens, you've got the musculature to support the body parts. Same thing with a knee injury. You know, if your quads and hamstrings are strong, your knees are supported in that way. And so the head is kind of the same with the neck. And look, yeah, you don't have to go do crazy football, weird exercises. It's really just, doing pull-ups, doing push-ups, lifting your groceries sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of things that people can put in there. And I mean, I can't say enough about strength training. And as I've gotten older, realizing that I need to do more of it because it starts to go away as we get older. And my friend Juliette Starrett likes to say that strength training is your 401k for your health. So it really is your prevention, it's your protection, it's your armor that you're going to build around yourself so that you can be strong and resilient in the case of a concussion or a hit on your head or anything else. But yeah, that neck strength and neck mobility, because as we found in our little journey here is I had, some old neck issues that then were really exacerbated by my crash.
Yep. Yep. Good points. Take care of your armor, folks. Yeah, and then moving on to sort of like as this has come up again and again too, we are not floating brains detached from our heads. Like we are all one unit, one system, and having good nutrition, like what you feed yourself also feeds your brain. It nourishes your brain. Your brain does need nourishment. And Momentous is our title sponsor here, and they have a specific TBI supplement protocol, right, that they use with the NFL. And that is, we'll drop it in the show notes so people can check it out. But it has very high doses of things like creatine and omega-3s and vitamin D. But, in a conversation that I had with Patrick Dixon, who is an exercise physiologist and is also senior director of human performance at Momentous, we were really just talking about how it's also just like you have glycogen in your muscles and protein for muscle protein synthesis in your muscles, like it's good to have like everything you need on board for your mental and cognitive health too. And that does mean having enough omega-3 fatty acids, fish and sardines and all those things. It's easy to supplement too if you don't like those things. Well documented to improve memory and cognitive well-being and blood flow to the brain, which is important. Vitamin D, we talk about that in every single circle, right? It's really good for you. It's also neuroprotective. And creatine, which is having more than a moment right now. It's very popular. You hear about it everywhere. But it is one of the most researched supplements on, for sure, muscle and skeletal health. But also, there's a growing body of research on the positive effects it has in brain creatine stores, which help with cognition and memory, especially in aging adults or during times of metabolic stress. And as we have learned, concussion, TBI is really metabolic stress. So that like 5 grams daily that many people are taking for strength and fitness may be good for brain health too.
I didn't know any of this. I mean, of course, we get inundated with supplement and you should take this, you should take that, you should take that. And I didn't know that there was a specific, really well-researched concussion supplement protocol until after I hit my head. And then I was sent this, Momentous sent us this. It has what to do in the immediate after. If you do have a concussion, week 1, week 2, week 6, and then ongoing. But I learned a lot. I didn't know about the neuroprotective effects of creatine, omega-3, vitamin D. And what I really like about all of those, and I spent some time, I actually went to do a congressional presentation, a congressional briefing with Momentous on TBI. And when I was there, I learned that the military, football, wrestling, those groups have been doing research on these supplements for over a decade,
Wow.
probably even more than that. And so they're not in trials or anything like that. This stuff is actually proven to really help you not just be neuroprotective, but also a lot of other things, like you said, that are just
Yeah.
really good for us. So I'm one who likes to, you know, be specific about the supplements I take. I
Me
don't just
too.
take everything because, I want to be intentional about it. But these are three things now that will always be part of my protocol.
Yeah, no, as a, ever aging athlete, as we all are, I take all three of these as standard course. And it was funny, I actually, asked Alicia Turbovich when I saw her at the conference, who we had on one of the previous episodes, her thoughts. And she's like, it's like anything, there's science, people are looking at it. She's like, I take it for my muscles, so she's like, helps the brain, great. And that's pretty much like, what the research is pointing that way. So
Well, it goes back to that your brain and your body are not separate things. And so something that you're is doing that's good and neuroprotective for your brain is for sure going to have downstream effects and affect the rest of your body.
yeah, no doubt. And we also learned a lot, which I thought was interesting, about the susceptibility of different people for concussion and certain concussion symptoms. And if you have, they're still trying to tease out like who gets long concussion symptoms and, and who is more susceptible to concussion. And it was really enlightening. And it also makes sense, as we talked about last episode, when you see like if you have a history of migraines, well, guess what? If you have a history of anxiety and depression, but also there are these, I've been really interested to see what the sex differences look like. And, when you were having this long journey, I knew so many other females that were, I mean, Alison Tetrick had this kind of thing. Kelly Catali. I just know a lot of bike racing females, and I've read stories about them, and it made me wonder, I'm like, is there something there?
When people hear like, oh, it's almost like you can get all these tests now to see if you have the genes for cancer, or if
Mm.
you have, if you're going to be susceptible to this, or how soon you're going to die. And there's a little bit of this kind of panic of like, oh, well, I just don't want to know if I'm susceptible to something else. I kind of just don't want to know and put our head in the sand. And so, when we learned about that, yes, I had migraines as a kid. I have suffered, with mild depression before, and anxiety. I have, I am kind of nervous sometimes. And, I think about that and like, would it, like, maybe I didn't want to know that, but quite honestly, being informed in that way, it would have targeted my own personal care for myself. So, as we've talked about with therapy and some of the other things, I would have gone sooner to one of those treatment protocols, knowing, oh, and knowing I had a pre-existing neck injury. I better look at my neck right away. So this is saying if people are sort of more likely to have long concussive symptoms, it's not to scare people or have them not ride their bikes or go do fun things. It's actually to target your care if you do get one, to go, I'm going to go to see a hormone specialist. I'm going to go see a neck specialist. I'm going to go see a whatever. And so having that knowledge of, do you have a sort of precursor to potentially having more severe symptoms, then you're going to take it more seriously. You're going to get the right help right away.
Excellent point.
I consider my nutrition and lifestyle healthy and sound, but many of us, me included, still don't get all of the essentials for optimized health from diet alone. I've always dabbled in supplements, but recovering from a brain injury with years of ongoing symptoms really forced me to hone in more precisely on what my brain and body needed to heal in the short term and also to thrive for the rest of my life. Creatine, omega-3, and vitamin D are three nutrients that expert research shows to be helpful for cognitive recovery and foundational for long-term health. Creatine is integral for energy production in cells, including those in your brain and muscle. Omega-3s are critical in impacting inflammation, muscle recovery, and brain health and function. And higher concentrations of vitamin D improve muscle strength and power, sleep quality, mood regulation, and support the immune system. These three supplements are now pillars of my daily routine. But look, not all supplements are created equally. Momentous is a company determined to bring trust and transparency to the supplement space. All of their formulas are designed with human performance experts and are NSF and Informed Sports certified for use by professional and collegiate athletes. They call this the Momentous Standard, and has become synonymous with the industry's gold standard in quality and efficacy. So if you're like me and you want to support your brain and body with supplements made and used by the best, go to livemomentous.com and use the code BRAINSTORM for 20% off all of my favorite products. That's livemomentous.com with the code BRAINSTORM.
2 to 3 million females have a concussion each year in the US. And unfortunately, females have worse outcomes, more severe symptoms, increased cognitive impairment, and prolonged recovery. And right now, there are still more questions than answers. Though the female menstrual cycle and how our fight and flight system tightly interacts with our reproductive system seems to play a role. For more insights, we sat down with Dr. Julie Rios, who is leading the groundbreaking women's health concussion study. Okay, Julie, thank you so much for joining us for part of this series. Women are understudied. Concussion is, we're learning so much, and put the two of them together, and I feel like, wow, there's a lot we need to know. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for being here.
No problem. I'm so excited to be here and talk about my work.
So you are an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Reproductive Sciences. You're very into reproductive endocrinology and infertility. How did this come up? What inspired you to lead the Women's Health Concussion Study?
Yeah, so actually we had a fellow in our program that was an athlete, and she had this idea for her study many years ago. It was actually published in JAMA in 2017. And she was interested in, she had also heard some of the background that women can have different outcomes, and she was interested in like the reproductive function. And so her study showed that women with concussion had more than 2 irregular periods in the study time, which was more common than like orthopedic controls. And it was a shorter study. It was only looking at 3 months, but they did show that there was shorter periods in the patients that were had a TBI versus like an orthopedic injury. And so that comes with some of the question of, well, why is that? What's happening? So the outcome was there, but not the like why. And so what came up is that we have the Chuck Knoll Foundation here in Pittsburgh that funds TBI and like neuroscience research. And so our team was kind of asked to also be a part of this, to kind of lead the women's health side. And how do we measure our hormones, and what hormones do we measure, and how do we figure out why there's this irregular period? And then we also wanted to know, how long does this last? Is it just at the time of concussion, because her study was pretty soon after, or is this something that like goes on? And I was curious because one of my neighbors that lives around me, her daughter was in the study, and occasionally when her daughter would get stressed, she would have irregular periods. And this was years after her concussion. And so very curious as to, is this a long-term problem? And so our current study isn't looking at 5-10 years, but at least it's looking at a full year after injury to see, do periods kind of go back to normal? Is this a prolonged issue? And so that was some of the interest, was just having a little bit of a person that's being affected by this in my own life, as well as always interested in sex differences and like how the reproductive axis affects the overall health of the patient.
It's so interesting. In my other life, doing a active menopause woman podcast, we talk about the intersection of the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis and the HPA axis, the fight or flight, and how that gets so crazy during perimenopause. What is the underlying, if there is a hypothesis on what's going on there with the menstrual cycle?
2 main areas. One is that adrenal axis. Cortisol is a stress hormone. We know that can be affected during that being elevated or off can affect the HPO axis or the ovarian axis. So that's one thought. Cortisol and stress hormones are very hard to monitor and manage. You almost need like daily monitoring and multiple times a day. But the other thought is there's another hormone called prolactin, and that hormone can be elevated after injuries. Sometimes like tumors can grow and press on this and press on the pituitary, and increased prolactin can cause irregular periods. So that's one thought as well. Other things that we are looking at is, thyroid, because that's also an axis, the HP, thyroid, adrenal, ovarian, they all interact. And there's actually a very nice diagram that kind of shows us that when periods are off, we have to kind of look at all of these different axes to kind of figure out what's going on. Um, One of our thoughts too was trying to figure out, is the signal starting but just not finishing? And so trying to figure out, is the ovary getting any signal and then it's just getting cut off, or is the ovary getting no signal at all from the brain? And so we're actually checking urine samples in some of our patients every 3 days. So this is the hard part of studying the menstrual cycle, is that it goes up and down. And so
Yeah.
if you came in for blood work twice, we're going to miss it. And so we're doing 3 months of urine samples where we're looking for those ovarian hormones, and and um and being able to see if there's a change. And so we have a little bit of preliminary data back, and it does seem to be, for one or two injured patients, that there is something going on with the ovarian hormones. And so we'll time that back to what's going on in the brain and try to make a story for what is happening, because no one's really studied this at all. We know it happens, but no one really knows why.
It's so interesting. I had a coworker I work with really ask the question about that because she had a pretty significant concussion, and she was just like, did it throw me into perimenopause? I mean, she literally asked that question because everything was so messed up, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, and perimenopause is dependent really on the eggs in our ovary. So we wouldn't expect,
Well, I'm
unless,
just saying what she was
yeah,
experiencing was making her question that.
right. And
Yeah.
so, but again, those symptoms, the shorter menstrual cycles, sometimes if you don't have enough estrogen, some people will experience hot flashes intermittently. So it can definitely make you feel that way. And so again, how long does this last? Is it based on the severity of injury? Is it related to other symptoms? So those are some of the early things we're looking at, but our team here at UPMC is really dedicated to looking at this in more studies too, to look at really long term. So years after injury, are we still seeing problems in the reproductive hormones? Things I worry about: if you're having irregular periods and you want to get pregnant one day, it can make it harder. And so trying to also figure out, were patients that had, or people that had injuries in the past, did they have a more increased risk of infertility? Other things I worry about: bone health. Estrogen is super important for bone health. And these are a lot of times can be athletes that also have a lot of stress on their bodies. And so are we seeing more issues with fractures and injuries? We also know in some of the data that women that have a TBI will have more cognitive, like longer time to improve executive functioning and kind of those cognitive skills. And that is something that we know too. In women that go through early menopause, there is some evidence that they may have early, like, cognitive dysfunction, and using estrogen can help improve that. So there's a lot of questions out there that relate to these, like, hormonal axis. There's some early studies, or there's some small studies that say estrogen and progesterone may be protective. So our patients that continue, or people that are continuing having regular periods and having estrogen, progesterone, are they going to have a better outcome than those that had a disrupted, HPO axis?
Interesting, really interesting stuff. When you're talking about the symptomology and the more severe symptoms, I've heard a lot of different things about women and concussion specifically, and if there are sex differences, and the waters seem pretty murky. Some people have said, oh, they just don't seek care early enough. Other people say, no, it's their neck. Some people say, no, there really are differences. What you're saying sounds like maybe there's even a hormonal component that affects some, but not other. Does it matter if it's in the luteal phase or the follicular phase? Um, what do we or don't we know there?
So not enough to say a clear definition. If you look at all the studies that do compare the sexes, there's many studies that say women will have prolonged course of recovery. Was that due to just them seeking care later? Was their injury not quite as severe? Men are often associated with potentially more aggressive sports and more injured sports. And but they often have more head protection too. And so people are looking at those sports more often than maybe they're looking at soccer or cheerleading or cycling where an injury can occur. So this is, I think, newer area too. The other piece is that women do often, in general, are more likely to see a physician. They're also more likely to report symptoms. And so are is it really a delayed? Are they not seeing a doctor? I don't think we know. Looking at all patients with estimated TBI, they feel like minor TBI, so minor brain injuries, probably do not get reported, maybe up to even 50% or more. And so repetitive minor TBIs are definitely a concern. And domestic violence is also one that can unfortunately cause a lot of TBI, and we can truly understand why that's underreported. So there's a lot of, is this because of just lack of seeing a physician or being underreported, or is there other sex differences? Animal models can give us a little bit more concrete data, but even that's a mixed bag depending on the model you use. There's been different reports of inflammation that women may have reduced initial inflammation, which is protective, but they may have ongoing longer inflammation, which might be more damaging. Also, the way the vasculature, like blood supply, gets back to the brain after an injury, that can definitely be different. And we know that estrogen is definitely a super important hormone in vascularization. So I definitely feel if I had to say there are sex differences as to why, is it the shape of the brain, the size of the bones, the way that the injury can actually occur? Men often have a taller stature. Their injuries can sometimes occur in a different way, like football injury or whatnot. The angle is going to be different. So I think that a lot of that needs to be studied, but it's hard to really study inflammation, ischemia. Like imaging helps, but it's not as good as being able to like look at the brain, which we obviously cannot do. And so those are things that now that it's become more people are being aware and becoming aware that this is a problem for women just as much as men. We're seeing more women in combat positions in the military since 2016. So these are really things that we do need to understand. And do patients or women need to have hormone replacement as soon after a TBI? Will that improve our outcomes? And so those are all things I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And Rebecca's postmenopausal, so is it different for women who are using a hormone therapy versus women who are not?
Yeah. There was one study that was interesting that showed perimenopausal women were at more risk than postmenopausal women.
So
And
interesting.
so again, very small study, hard to know were more of those postmenopausal women on hormone therapy, whereas perimenopausal women often are not.
They
Um,
have more swinging hormones, and more cortisol. It's hard to know.
Absolutely. So it's all these pieces need to be studied and in larger groups, larger populations. And, one of our challenges has been, getting patients that want to do a study and get a blood draw or give us 90 urine samples over, or 30 urine samples over a 90-day period.
Yeah.
Um, and, we are definitely getting there and working on collaborations to increase our numbers, but this is how we figure those things out and also figure out what's the best therapy we should offer women and does the type of injury matter? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's great work you're doing. It's very exciting. Is there anything that you want our audience to know that we haven't talked about the work you're doing?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, letting people know we are doing this work. Currently, it's in Pittsburgh. We are looking at other sites and, other studies. So as those grow, we'll definitely keep you guys at your team updated so you can let people know. But, if you have an injury that is concerning for concussion or TBI, it is really best to get evaluated. Even if
Yeah.
you feel fine, the underreporting and the potential multiple risk of injuries, we don't know those outcomes. And the more people seek care, the more we learn.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Rios, for your work and for sharing it with our show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated talking with you today.
Hey, it's Celine breaking in here to say that if you're feeling a little freaked out over all of this, you are not alone. The more I learned about women like Rebecca suffering from these kinds of post-concussive symptoms, the more concerned I got as well. After all, I have hit the ground and my head my fair share of times while out mountain biking and snowboarding, so I pulled what we learned into a simple guide that explains what concussion is, how to know if you have one, and what to do if you do. It's called The Active Woman's Guide to Concussion, and you can download it for free through Feisty Women's Performance. I will put a clickable link in the show notes in each and every episode to make it easy to find and access. Thanks for listening, stay feisty, and stay safe. You know, when I first contacted Dr. Julie Rios, I really wasn't sure what I was going to find because I was like, oh, I don't know. Is this going to fit? Are we going to use this? And then, man, that just that 10 minutes I talked to her, I was like, this is fascinating. I thought everything she said was so fascinating. I'm really interested to see what comes out of there because they've been, I go to the female athlete conference, I go to the concussion symposium, and everybody talks about the female issue, so to speak. But there's it's so complicated because female physiology is so complicated. The menstrual cycle and how it vacillates and how our hormones fluctuate and all of that make it very, and how, as she talks about, like you have that fight or flight, right? It's intricately connected to your ovarian axis, which dictates your menstrual cycle and your reproductive health. So if those things get disrupted, you can see a lot of knock-on effects. It's really interesting to me.
I mean, it's so cool. And she dropped the knowledge bombs in like 10 minutes.
I
I
know.
was like, whoa. And I was just blown away. One, again, I was encouraged that there are people out there who are specializing in these areas who know a lot and have been doing a ton of research. They're in new clinical trials. There's new stuff happening all the time. And there are people like Julie who really know what they're talking about. And she's specifically to women, which, like you said, it's so complicated. The body is so complicated. We can't expect our primary care physician to know all of these things.
Totally.
But yet, like, this is a critical piece of, hormones like dictate all of the actions in our body. Hormones kind of run the show in a lot of ways. And it's not something that I considered during my recovery journey at all. It's something I'm interested now to look into because I'm still ongoing with my recovery. And I'm like, this is an area I have not looked at all. And, I'm post-menopausal and was like, wow. And I've talked to, I do have a friend who actually had a really serious
Yeah,
concussion and
the
has had
mutual
some,
friend. Hmm.
yeah, mutual friend. She's amazing. And she has gone down this road with some progesterone treatments. And maybe you understand the hormone thing a lot better than I do. What did you take from what Julie was talking about?
Well, it made a lot of sense. I mean, and I hadn't even taken it to that conclusion. I mean, for those who don't know, I have an active women's menopause podcast, and I'm in this world all the time. And estrogen and progesterone affect the brain profoundly. They affect like all of our cells, and they are neuroprotective, and progesterone is neuroprotective. So when those hormones decline post menopause, the brain doesn't have as much as its armor, if you will, or as much of the mechanisms that it might have that are protective in that way. And it might leave you more vulnerable. And that's why I asked her, talking about would it be different for someone who's on hormone therapy versus not? Or should someone who has concussion and or a TBI postmenopause consider hormone therapy like our mutual friend who is, using progesterone? I mean, these are obviously things that we do not know at this point, but it's very worthwhile investigating for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the research in a lot of areas,
Yep.
including this one. And there are people who are being helped by certain protocols that maybe aren't totally scientifically proven. It doesn't mean that it's not worth going down that road if that is something that you want to try. And there's studies going on all the time. And so it's exciting for me that there are new areas of research happening. And this hormone one is really, really interesting to me. And it is something that I might check into a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, they're as someone who spends a lot of time looking at hormone therapy, I can tell you they are studying it every single day, every single day. So it is well worth, if you are having trouble, especially like with the cognitive piece, I think it's 100% worth investigating it, because I hear from women who haven't hit their head that get help with like anxiety and depression and brain fog. So yeah.
Right. And there are specialists who specialize in this area, so you can seek out those people, and Julie's one of them.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so to wrap up pretty much this journey that we've been on with the podcast series and your own journey of what you've learned along the way, including what we've learned here in the past 4 weeks, like what would you want to leave people with?
Yeah, this has been an awesome journey. And what I would want to leave people with is really just a simple checklist of what to do if you hit your head. So that if it does happen to you or somebody around you, you've got clear instructions, because that's what I didn't have. I didn't know what to do. And so through our learning and experience and my journey, I kind of made a simple checklist. And number one is to tell people around you immediately that you've fallen and you hit your head, you broke your helmet, whatever it is. Communicate to the people around you, because it is an invisible injury. Make it not invisible by verbalizing it and communicating what happened, what's going on, because you need a team. You have an injury in your brain potentially. And so if you don't tell somebody around you, you don't have that kind of help, and it's really hard to manage on your own. So that's number one, tell the people around you. Number two, get to a doctor right away. That might be an ER visit. In my case, I should have gone to the ER immediately because of the velocity of my crash and all the things that were going on. So get medical care right away. That might be an ER, that might be make appointment with your primary care physician, depending on your symptoms, but right away seek medical help so that you can, again, build that team around you to help you. Number three, and this is something that I personally would have done myself, is to start the Momentous recommended supplement protocol right away. And there's a ton of research behind creatine, omega-3s, vitamin D, and I just didn't know that. And the protocol has a prophylactic, something you can start ahead of time if you are in a kind of a sport where you have impact, but also immediately after an impact supplement protocol, 2 weeks out, and then ongoing. So it's a great strategy. I would have started that earlier, and I just didn't know about it. Number four, something that I didn't do very well, like a lot of these things, is reducing emotional stress as much as you can. The anxiety of around it. Like I said, the brain is working really hard to recover. And if you putting that emotional stress on your brain is actually making its healing job a little bit harder. So whether that's yoga for you, whether it's deep breathing, whether it's taking a couple days off of work, not looking at a computer, however that looks for you, just trying to chill and relax is will help your brain do its own recovery. I mean, we've talked to some specialists who said your brain wants to heal. It's trying to heal. It actually knows how to heal itself. It's that we get in the way by having high anxiety or stress around it. And so relaxing as much as you can. Number five, this is a big one, is to keep moving. I sort of went into this dark hole and stopped moving, but keep moving in a safe way. You don't want to hit your head again. That's a
That's the
major
big thing. Yeah.
That's a big thing. So don't go do anything where you might fall.
Yeah.
So, but keep moving, whether it's walking, whether it's stationary bike, in a way that's a moderate amount of exercise for you, because that is also going to help your brain heal. It's going to help those hormones. It's going to help blood flow. All those things that your body wants to do to heal itself comes with movement in a safe way that is normal for you. Number six, this was really important for me and the people around me, is to track and record what's going on subjectively, like, oh, I'm cranky, I'm moody, I'm whatever. So subjectively, and then objectively, I've got a headache, my sleep is disrupted. I use tracking devices that really helped me. I use journaling. I had actually you and my coach and my coworker actually write down, and my best friend, how I was doing. And I would check in with them, because I didn't trust myself. And so the subjective and objective measurement was really helpful for me, one, to see progress, but number two, it also helps the medical professionals know, okay, you're having this symptom. Let's address it in this way. Oh, you're having this symptom. And I would forget. And so that's why I had to write it down and ask my friends and keep records, um, because it's really going to help you see progress and help your care providers give you the right kind of care. So keeping records was great for me. Number seven, really wrapping your head around and that this is a systemic approach. PT on your neck. Maybe it's therapy for you. Maybe it's exercise. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's going for walks. It's exercise. But yes, it's all of those things because your brain is your central nervous system. It controls everything.
Command Central.
It makes sense that it's a multifaceted effect, and whether that's massage, whether there's all sorts of things that are feeding into your nervous system from your whole body. And so a whole body systemic approach is really important, and staying with it. We talked about what a roller coaster my recovery was because I had fits and starts and I didn't stay with a diligent approach. Like any injury, you have an ongoing protocol for 1 to 3 to 5 years. So treating it in that way, it is physical therapy, literally. And then number eight, I'm going to send everybody back to number one, which is communication with your loved ones on an ongoing basis of how are you doing? What's going on? My husband said to me at one point in the middle of it, like, I don't know how to help you if you don't tell me what's going on. And so I put that in twice to communication because it really is what will keep you afloat in the hard times, and it'll help people around you be able to be on your team and assist you. And then the last one, number nine, is adjusting our mindset around your injury or your loved one's injury. That brain injury is an injury. And that means there is a healing process, there are steps, there are things you can do to get yourself better. And it might be short or long, but the brain can recover. The brain is massively neuroplastic, massively neuro regenerative, probably more than any other part of our body, which is really cool to me to think of, if I go back to like, I wanted to return to where I was or who I was before, I actually feel like I'm returning to a better place than I was before because I think my brain is getting stronger and healing because I'm actually giving it attention. I'm recovering it, but I'm also training it
Yeah.
in a way. And that's a really cool concept. I want people to go away with that mindset that this is a healable injury and it doesn't have to be a big deal. So that's my checklist. That is where we'll put it in the show notes too. But yeah, that's what I want people to leave with is a process to, address this head on and go for it and heal faster than they might if they don't use the checklist.
So, closing, I'd like to close with, I started this whole thing asking, how are you today? And I think it'd be nice to sort of, because I've seen really the transformation over this course of just recording this with you, honestly. So let's end with, how do you feel today?
I might get emotional again, like
Okay.
I did with the first question, but I feel really grateful to be here and to be alive and to honestly to have found my way again. I was really lost and I'm so grateful to to be here and to have a process and to see healing and to see that I'm making it through, the pain tunnel. Really, there's light at the end of the tunnel for me. And so I feel really excited about that. I'm not totally there yet. I'm not out of the tunnel, but there is light and there's excitement. And so I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm actually grateful that the crash happened
Mm.
because I have learned so much about myself, my health, my mindset, and I know I'm coming through this stronger and more aware of who I am as a person and really how to take care of my physical and mental well-being for the rest of my life. I have more tools that are actually going to serve me, not just in concussion recovery, but in just being a healthy, vital person. And so I'm grateful that the crash happened. I am extremely grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this story. It's really important to me that I share life lessons. I share lessons from the trail. And, I've always wanted to be an educator and share what I learn when I'm out there, whether it's equipment wise or training wise. But this is even the most important share probably of my life, of helping people get through what can seem like a life-changing, devastating, life-ending injury. And so I'm super grateful for this story and be able to share it, and really collaborating with you, Celine, as a friend, as a teammate, as a fellow cyclist, as a really smart researcher. I couldn't have done this without you, and Feisty. And like, I love the collaboration. So I'm grateful that we've gotten to do this together, that we had the opportunity, that Momentous is, made this possible. Feisty made it possible. And really for the caregivers and the people in my life who stuck with me, because I was giving up on myself and other people didn't. So thank you. You know who you are. And mostly to the people who are here listening, I'm super grateful that you're taking the time and energy to help yourself or someone around you heal through this injury, because it is a healable injury. And so I'm really excited to see what comes from this. And hopefully that's a bunch of happy, healthy people. And that is, I'm kind of at a loss for words, because that's part of some of my ongoing recovery, is getting emotional and thinking about how to put words together. But the overriding theme is, I'm glad this happened, and I'm glad that you and I could work together to help people.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. I appreciate you. I know this has not been easy. I have seen it is healing, and just wishing everybody out there their best journey wherever they are, and stay safe, and thanks for listening. Well, that's our show and our series. We could do many, many more episodes on the topic of concussion, and there's new research coming out all the time on treatment and diagnostics, but our goal was to take you through this one human journey and leave you with insights that we hope will help should you need it. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks to Feisty Media, our producer Carrie Barrett, Momentous, all of our contributing experts, and of course to Rebecca Rush for making it possible. You'll find resources to learn more in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Be good, everyone.